Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition, and we're going to talk about the Keep Pile. Alright, so this video is a response video to Bob World Builder's Keep Pile video, which is, if you pile up all the Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition canon material, what is worth keeping? Fantastic video. I really love this video. So let me just talk a couple things about. So one, you'll find the link to the video in the description below. Two, this is Bob World Builder's content. So if you're not familiar with Bob World Builder, he's an interesting guy. He's quickly become one of the top Dungeons and Dragons commentators out there. He's got, considerable amount of subs. He's got momentum. He's got sponsors. He's doing a great job with his Dungeons and Dragons commentary. I'm really glad he's in the community. He does have some things I wish he would improve. One, he has this ASMR voice. He's got this really peaceful, calm, elevator music voice, which is a little I'm kind of like, am I getting high school guidance counselor advice or D&D commentary? So I wish he'd make it a little, just step up his pace and put a little inflection in his voice, but what are you gonna do, right? So basically, he's very, very good, and he made this phenomenal video, and he went through every single canon Dungeons and Dragons book, and he said, get or don't get. Now, of course, he's like, this is just my list. Everybody's list is gonna be different, right? Which I dislike that. I think commentators should say, "Hey, I'm speaking from a vantage, right? I'm a little higher on the knowledge bracket than most people. I've been doing this a while. I have really strong opinions on it. So yeah, I think people should just, I wish he had owned it a little bit more. But here's where we're at. So first of all, what I want to talk about is what he got right and what he got wrong. All right. So first of all, let's talk about what he got right. So let's talk about his keep list. His keep list is brilliant. By the way, you can go watch that before you watch this. You can just stay here and I'll give you context so you can understand it and never watch that. Or you can watch this and then go watch that. So I'm going to structure this so you can do any of those. Right? So here we go. So what did he get right? He did get a lot right. He's very, very good. He did a great job. And he did get some stuff right. So one of the things, what was his key pile? I couldn't believe his key pile. It was so short. It was only 6 items, right? So he's saying out of the almost 30 30 canon books that are in Dungeons & Dragons now. And actually, this is fascinating too. What did he consider canon? He actually considered actually, Jeremy Crawford was very, very clear about this. He said, Jeremy Crawford was super clear that all D&D hardbacks, right? So, Explorer's Guide to Exandria, that's a setting book. Storm King's Thunder, that's an adventure. Xanathar's, that's a utility. PHB, that's a core book. Those 4 traditional hardback, same size content, they are all unquestionably canon in 5e, right? But even when you're talking about canon in 5e, even when Jeremy Crawford, things got weird because the Essentials kit, I think D&D is Crawford absolutely considers the Essentials kit canon, and it's really important that the Essentials kit is considered canon. Then there's the starter set. So the next is the box set, right? So you're like, oh, well, that would be simple. The box sets are, canon. And it kind of makes sense, right? So if you go, Essentials kit, starter set, those are canon, they totally make sense, right? But what do you do with Rick and Morty's? That's a box set. There's absolutely no difference. It's literally in the same box. The only difference is the wrapper. It has exactly the same components, dice, DM sheet, like it's the same, right? Like, and yet if you asked Jeremy Crawford flat out if the Rick and Morty is canon, I think you'd be surprised at what answer you got back, right? So it gets really weird what canon, like the whole canon question is massive. But one thing that I appreciated about his video was he was like, if it's a 5e box set, that Wizards of the Coast produced, then yes, it's canon, just like any of the other books. So he was considering all box sets, and everything that has the official D&D ampersand logo. And honestly, that I think is the realest. That is the real deal, raw action, right? If it's got the D&D red D&D logo on it, it's canon, in my opinion, right? Like that is that's the truest form of canon, in my opinion. All right, so what was his list? His list was shocking. I couldn't believe, out of almost 30 books, this is all he kept, right? He kept the Essentials Kit, he kept a starter set, he kept Volo's Guide, he kept the Player's Handbook, and he kept Xanathar's and Tasha's, okay? So let's talk about that list. What did he get right? There's a lot that's right on this. One, I 100% agree with him that that Xanathar's and the Tasha's, those utility books are just like, you'd be out of your mind not to buy them. They're for dollar for value. There's nothing. I think except for the core rule books, you got to have the core rule books, in my opinion. Except for the core rule books, there's no better value in all of D&D than Xanathar's and Tasha's. They're just spectacular, right? So I totally agree with him on that, right? PHB, 100% agree. Volo's, is he out of his mind? That is I own that book. I don't own all D&D books. I just, I don't own them all, right? And there's a whole mix. Like, I'd love to just buy them all, and I could, but like, it'd take money out of my kids' college fund. I'm not doing that, like, I think there will be a day where I do own all the 5th edition stuff, but it's going to be a while, because I'm buying it slowly when I have, the extra money, and I'm not like Shiny Crow buying something else, like 1980s hardbacks, D&D hardbacks. So here's where we land, right? So Volo's, I think, is utter junk. It's literally in my bottom 3. Like, the only book I think that's worse than Volo's is Acquisitions Incorporated. That thing, oh jeez. So I have no idea how on earth Volo's would get on anybody's keep list. It is pure trash, in my opinion. Okay, next, the starter set. Why? Like, the starter set, you could throw that thing in a lake. Like, the Essentials Kit is out, and the Essentials Kit is literally an apology for the starter set. They're like, we're sorry we left you with that piece of junk starter box, for 5 years. Here's a real box that looks exactly like Pathfinder 1E starter box, which is the best starter box that's ever been built in any tabletop role-playing game ever. And if you're not aware, that's what they did, right? The Essentials, first of all, Paizo, the Pathfinder game has its own whatevers, but the Paizo 1E starter box was the absolute perfection of any starter box. And that's all the Essentials Kit is them just saying, okay, Paizo defeated us, let's copy them, right? And if you look at it, what's in it, how it's made, the structure, all of that, the one good thing is, because they're at scale, and Dungeons & Dragons makes that millions of products every year, distinct products, they were able to get it about $10 cheaper than Paizo could, right? So it's as good as Paizo's box, but the Essentials Kit is phenomenal. And I'll tell you right now, like, I feel like the starter set is embarrassingly bad, when even those two products shouldn't even be put in the same physical proximity, right? The Essentials Kit is phenomenal. Starter set is junk, and is an embarrassment, in my opinion, that it should never even existed for that long. Like, it was just really bad. It was, and the biggest thing is, like, it was just some pamphlets and some dice. Like, it was just junk. I couldn't believe how bad it was. So I can't believe the starter set got on his keep list. That's a trash selection, right? Essentials Kit, 100%. All right. So, one, I liked 2/3 of his keep list, right? And agree with 2/3 of his keep list. But what did he leave off that I think is just gallingly a bad choice? All right, so here we go. He left off the Dungeon Master Guide and the Monster Manual Guide, which I think is flat out irresponsible. And outrageously prejudiced. All right, so let's talk about it. So one, he's actually telling players and dungeon masters, you don't need the monster manual and the DMG. This is nuts, right? Like, what are you going to do if you're playing a druid? Where are you going to get your beast forms, right? Those are in the monster manual. So you're saying that they should own the player's handbook and have 1 out of 12 characters they literally can't play. It's just so horrible. Like, and saying that a dungeon master could get away without having the monster manual is insane. Do you know what his solution for this is? Like, Tome of Beasts 5e, right? And this is crazy, and I want to call this to task, right? He's saying, I don't think, Bob the World Builder isn't trying to cheat anybody, and I don't think he's really being unfair with his sponsors. But because he is sponsored, he has this idea that you can bring non-official books to your table. And I can tell you right now, a lot of tables, right, will not put away with this. If you have weak-minded players, but like my players do not truck with any kind of like off-grid, like Toma Beasts, right? I think it's Cobbled Press or whatever, right? They don't play with that, right? And the reason why is it's not D&D canon, right? And we don't mess around with non-D&D canon stuff at our table. And the reason why is the moment you bring out Toma Beasts, one of your players is going to go, hey, I found this, weird subclass on some, subreddit, and I now want to run it, right? And you're like, you can't bring that nonsense in here. We play a good, balanced game. This stuff has gone through Unearthed Arcana. I don't need your crap noise over here, right? Like, and so as any good DM, you need to be able to push off, like some, I had this weird, like, and it's important because these non-D&D companies, they could just pile on extra feats and people will buy it, right? Because they're like, oh, this is more powerful than what I'm getting from Dungeons and Dragons, right? But it's a huge problem. And once you say canon doesn't matter, like the D&D logo doesn't matter, you have to deal with all the weird, useless monster products that are going to come out of the internet. So it's insane, right? And I get it. Bob the World Builder's, cashing a check, and so he has to say, oh, non-D&D products can be useful. But every time you say, hey, go get this book, right, you give permission to your players to bring out the most weird, useless, crazy, overpowered, OP, broken crap off of some weird subreddit, right? Like, because you're like, oh, the D&D, the red D, the other red D, and the ampersand don't matter, right? Like, you can just, it's crazy time now. Anybody can just pull out whatever they find, right? It's a problem. It's a serious problem, right? So, all right, yeah. So I think the idea, and him saying that a DMG can get away with it without the monster manual is outrageously ridiculous. And the Dungeon Master Guide, right? Like, and he's saying, and what he says is, rather than the Dungeon Master Guide, use Return of the Lazy DM by Sly Flourish. Now, that's a fantastic book, right? But again, you are corrupting your stack, right? Like, I think what you should, and so how should somebody use the Sly Flourish's Lazy Dungeon Master, right? What you should do is you should read it, right? Write down some notes, and then you can actually use any ideas you find in there from the and basically the way you'll use them through official D&D official product is the Dungeon Master Guide, which he's saying you shouldn't have at the table, right? Says the rules aren't in charge, you're in charge, right? So then at that point, what you can do is you can simply use the ideas they have and just saying, I'm using DM's Fiat, which is given to me by this real book, the DMG, right? And then just change whatever you need to from your Fiat. You want to do it carefully, right? You want to do it respectfully. You want to make it clear to your players what you're doing. But so last part here. So all that's going on, right? And here's the biggest thing. It's so crazy. We have these relationships within Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeon masters and dungeon players have a relationship, right? And it's not a romantic relationship, but a lot of the rules of romantic relationships very much apply, right? Like, and so one of the things I think is when Bob the World Builder is saying you don't need the DMG and the Monster Manual, he is only saying that because he owns them and has read them cover to cover, right? And this is the worst example of do as I say, don't do as I do, right? And so, like, this is two partners, two romantic partners, and one romantic partner saying, nom, 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 kind of chewing on a sandwich and saying, my romantic partner is a terrible cook, nom, 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 and eating the sandwich that their partner made for them that morning, right? Oh, they're just so terrible. This sandwich is dry, just doesn't have enough sauce on it, nom, 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 nom. like, it's the worst. Like, he's saying, right, you don't need the DMG, you don't need the Monster Manual. He has it, right? And I would be shocked if that book wasn't at the table, if the Monster Manual and the DMG haven't been at his table every time he runs, right? And the reality is, I feel this is, there's so much hate for the DMG and the Monster Manual, and it's one of the worst problems we have in Dungeons and Dragons right now, is this idea that the Monster Manual and the DMG should not be in every Dungeon Master's hand, and in my opinion, every player's hands. So that is Bob the World Builder's keep list. It's a fantastic video. I highly recommend it. I just told you what I think he got right. I told you what I think he got wrong. How about you? What's your keep list, right? Can you pare it down to 6 items the way he did? Would the Volos get on anybody's keep list in the world? Right, last thing too, he did nix all of the Magic the Gathering books right out of the gate, which I've swung around on, and I'm back on MTG books. So all that's my opinion. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking, subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.